Okay, grade 8 math, 4 questions, advanced-ish in nature, but not overly difficult. The first question says half of x plus a quarter equals 3/8. So if I gave you the easy question of 2x plus 1 equals 3, the first thing you would have done is gotten rid of the constant by subtracting 1 from both sides. The only difference between that easy question and this one is I'm going to subtract a quarter from both sides. Subtract a quarter. I'll rewrite that here. So if I subtract a quarter, that's a zero pair. I'm left with half of x over here. But by subtracting a quarter, I end up with a grade 7 fraction questions. What is 3/8 take away 1/4? Well, find my common denominator, 8. 3/8 take away 2/8 is 1/8. So 3/8 take away a quarter is 1/8. So when I get rid of my constant, I end up with half of x is equal to 1/8. Now, the next thing I'm going to do is multiply both sides by 2. And when you multiply a fraction by 2, I'm going to make an exception here. Because I said don't use multiplication signs, but here, I want you to multiply by 2. Because when we learned in the fraction unit, multiplying by whole numbers, we said treat them as a fraction over 1 and multiply them. Cross-reduce if you want, but we won't worry about it. So when I multiply the numerators, I get 2, multiply the denominator. So the answer is x equals 2/8, which in lowest terms is 1 over 4. So your answer for the first question is x has a value of a quarter, right? 2 over 8, or in lowest terms, 1 over 4. In your second question, the only difference between the first and second question is instead of using fractional coefficients, I'm using decimal coefficients and constants. Exact same procedure. Get rid of your constant first by subtracting 1.5 from both sides. 0.5x is equal to negative 5. The sum of negative 3.5 and negative 1.5 is negative 5. Now, I'm going to divide both sides by 0.5, which is my coefficient. And x will equal, I'm not real great at dividing by decimals. I know the answer is 10, but I'm going to show you with the calculator. 5 divided by half, where I have $5 divided into piles of 50 cents. How many piles could I make? I could make 10 piles. A negative divided by a positive is a negative, so your answer is x equals negative 10. There's no difference in these questions and the easy ones. The only difference is you're dealing with fractions or decimals, which is a little bit complicated for some people, but not all people. Your next question, I'm going to get rid of the constant by subtracting 2 from both sides. That leaves me with 2x divided by 5 is equal to negative 5. And just to be clear, you don't have to know this, but I want to show you something. This 2x over 5 is the same thing as this. I'll show you why. If a coefficient of 2/5 is multiplying by x, I'm going to put the multiplication sign here just to show you. If I multiplied my numerators, what would I get here? I'd get 2x. If I multiplied my denominators, what would I get? I get 5. Multiplying by x over 1 is the same thing as multiplying by x, which is the same thing as a coefficient of 2/5. So this is the same thing. The reason why I say that is, well, it's not important, but I just wanted to show you that. If I drew it, this is the interesting part. There's 1/5. There's 2/5. As a model thing, that would be 2/5 x. So real quick, I'm going to multiply both sides by 5. That gives me 2x remains is equal to negative 25. I'm going to divide both sides by 2. And x will equal negative 12 and a half. Okay, half of 25. And your last question. And the last question, x or 2 divided by x. Now watch this. If I multiply both sides by x, all of you should understand that happens, right? Dividing by x and multiplying by x are opposite operations. I'm left with 2 on that side. But on the other side, because I multiplied both sides by x, I'm left with this. So by multiplying both sides by x, I end up with this equation. Now I'm going to divide both sides by the coefficient, and x will equal negative 0.5, or negative a half.